Hello, John.
Hello, John.
Hello. Hi.
So do you want to introduce yourself? Because it's always a good thing, because not everybody knows who you are, and we do have a few followers. So
Yeah, absolutely. John Penrose MP for Weston-super-Mare, which at the moment, until the Boundary Commission gets its hands on it, is the town of Weston-super-Mare, and then the constituency runs all the way inland from there to Blagdon. So all the villages to the east of Weston, basically, until you start getting wet in Blagdon Lake.
Oh, right. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
That's quite a long way out, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's all gorgeous as a result. You get seaside, and then you get men dips and all sorts of stuff. Yeah, it's great.
Wow, that is a big... How do you manage that?
I live smack in the middle in Winscombe, and it's at most 20 minutes in any direction to get to wherever I need to get to, basically.
Did you live in Winscombe anyway and then apply to be an MP?
Actually, no. My dad was brought up in Timsbury.
Right, okay.
So a bit further away, and Dido's family come from a bit south of here. Right. So I was just we were looking for seats that were selecting at the time anywhere in this area,
right.
and I was really pleased, because when I went and met the folk at Weston, I thought, all right, I'll get on with you. You seem to get on with me, and it's one of those things that if you're going to really sort of be successful in this sort of thing, you've got to have a team that you like and they like you, and it sort of works. So it was a bit of a sort of lucky but wonderful thing,
And I think, where you live is beautiful, but I think your whole constituency is beautiful. It is a beautiful part of the world.
I am a bit biased, to be fair. Yeah. So yes, it is beautiful, but I'm probably the wrong person to ask.
You're actually in John's...
I
am a constituent. Yeah. Yes, so yeah.
So being I know your job. I'm asking you questions here because we don't normally do this, but I'm asking you questions. But is it a tough job? Because we actually, we've had lots of people that are like in councils and stuff like that, and it's quite a difficult position because you never know what's going to happen, do you?
I guess the answer is yes, it's a tough job, but most of the best and most worthwhile jobs kind of are. And it's really worthwhile. But yeah, okay, it can be a bit of a sort of a rough old game in the process. Yeah. But actually, anything from being able to persuade a minister to do X when they were thinking of doing Y, through to I do weekly surgeries on Fridays. At my weekly surgery, somebody coming in sort of almost in tears saying, this particular bit of the state bureaucracy has ruined my life, and I can't fix it, and it's all awful. And being able to help them so they walk out having got an answer, actually you can make a huge difference to one person's life in that way. So all of that, from the really big scale stuff right down to the small and personal, that kind of makes it worthwhile. Yeah. But you're right. It's. I don't want to pretend it's all a sort of flat mill pond calm, because it ain't.
No.
I was going to say, you've done a lot of roles as well, haven't you? Sort of within government.
I think I'm the most hired and fired person.
Is that right?
Jointly. I think there's one other person who's I've been hired, and the thing about being in government and being a minister is, you can be doing a brilliant job or a rubbish job and get promoted or sacked entirely independently of whether or not you're actually any good or bad at what you do. And because the Prime Minister changes, there's a general election, they need somebody who comes from the northeast and you're from the southwest. It can be as input, and so you learn not to take it personally. But at the moment, I think I'm the most hired and fired person. But they're still talking to me, so it's.
But how do you cope with that emotionally when you've been given a position? And it must be. I know you say you're quite resilient to it, but that doesn't take it away.
Well, the thing is that if you, like me, I was a businessman before I went into politics, and there, if you get sacked, understandably, you get sacked because you've screwed up. Right? Yeah. So it's a very big deal. And so the first time it happened, I was pretty upset, and I said, look, what have I done wrong? And they said, you haven't done anything wrong. We're terribly sorry. In fact, we're slightly embarrassed. We were supposed to be promoting you, actually.
But we made a mistake.
But literally, that's what they said. Yeah, they said, we're terribly sorry. The spot which we intended to put you into has had to be taken by someone else who had a sense of humour failure when they were being moved and sacked. And therefore, the music stopped and we're one seat short and you're the person who's out. And they said, look, we will bring you back as soon as we can. We are very, very sorry. But so therefore, you're right. It kind of feels, if you're used to only losing your job if you've really made a right mess of it, you have to learn that actually you may still lose your job if you made a right mess of it in politics, but actually quite a lot of the time you can either get promoted or get demoted for reasons which are completely nothing to do with you. And you just got to sort of dust yourself down. It's the equivalent of sort of getting buried at the bottom of a scrum. And you've got to get up and sort of, brush the mud off and then find out where the ball's gone.
Carry on.
So what did you do before you were an MP?
Oh, I was, I used to run publishing companies. So I used to, I don't know if you or any of your podcast listeners and watchers have ever suffered with Longman textbooks.
Yep.
But I was the MD of that. It's part of Pearson. Big company. So I was the MD of that, and then I used to publish software for schools as well. So there's a special needs software company that I helped to sort of put together, that sort of stuff. So that's what I was doing.
Do you still have any interest in any of them, or do you not?
Not anymore. No. I mean, for a couple of reasons. One is, the world moves on, frankly, and I hope a bit useful to them for a while because my knowledge is still current. But actually now, I've been out of that market for over a decade. And I could probably still learn about it, but just it's I think it's one of those things where other people now know more about it than I do.
I think one of the things about being a politician from the outside looking in is very often people forget that you're a human being. And I think
it's because some of us don't behave like we are.
And also, people very much can put you on a pedestal and kind of. I mean, I know you personally, so I'm really fortunate. But I
never had a problem with putting me on a pedestal, have you?
Andrew can do that with anybody. It doesn't matter who you are.
Shut up, you two. But people do, don't they? They kind of feel that you're not reachable. Well,
it's an odd mixture actually, because I think one of the healthy things about British politics, particularly Westminster MP politics, is that people have a sort of healthy disrespect in that they don't sort of there's not much deference left. And actually, I think that's a good thing, because I think it means that MPs actually have to be sort of on their toes all the time. And that, coming from business where you have to pay attention to your customers every day, that's I think the right thing to do. So that's good. But it can occasionally rub off into, they're all a bunch of crooks and that sort of stuff. Actually, in my experience, I've got to tell you, I mean, there are a few rascals in every walk of life.
Of course, yeah.
And I'm afraid politics is no different. So you'll find a few wrong-uns in Parliament, just like anywhere else. But most people I meet who are MPs, doesn't matter which party they're from, Labour, Conservative, whatever it might be, they went into it and they're there because they want to try and make the world a better place. Now, I may disagree with how they want to make the world a better place, and they may disagree with me, but actually their motives are usually pretty good. So there's this weird, you're right, there's this weird sort of mixture of distrust and uncertainty. But also, you're right, it's really important, and particularly nowadays with social media being all around, you're really important that you're approachable, so that if somebody has got a problem, if they do need to come to my surgery, for example, they know how to get in touch so that they can get hold of help if they need it. But also it means that people they don't quite know what to expect. So what can your MP really do? And some of them think that if they're all corrupt and useless, they don't expect you to be able to do anything, and they're sort of amazed when you can. And at the other end of the scale, people seem to think that you're sort of Lord Voldemort, and you can sort of, a master of the dark arts, and you can make all sorts of things happen which shouldn't really, but maybe he'll make an exception for me. And actually, you can't do that either, because that would be contrary to the rule of law. So somewhere in the middle, there is actually a sort of sweet spot. You're right. It's people's approaches are wildly different depending on where they start from.
And I remember many years ago we had a challenge at home, and not with the police, but it was the police were involved in this, and we weren't getting anywhere. It was literally, we were not getting what we knew the law was. And I actually wrote to what's his name again? The minister that is in charge of the police. Home Secretary. Thank you. Yeah. I contacted him. I wrote him a very lengthy letter explaining everything that was going on. And interestingly, like that, it was literally change occurred like that. And I don't think, like you say, that people necessarily realise that whilst you are not Voldemort, thank God, that you do have a level of power that you can influence things into a certain degree.
It means that it's most basic.
Yeah.
That people will read my letter or they'll take my phone call.
Yeah.
Now, I may be then convincing or unconvincing, and I may also be asking for something which is impossible or possible.
Yeah.
But it doesn't at least mean you get through the door.
Yeah. And I think that's something that people don't realise, that their MP can actually help with that.
Yeah. But lots of things you can't help with, but
No,
you
of
can
course,
try.
yeah. No harm in asking, is there?
Exactly.
Perhaps a better analogy then, instead of Voldemort, maybe a dragon from Dragon's Den. You get people in the door.
Yeah, exactly. That's a good idea. Yeah.
So how many people attend the surgery every week, roughly?
It really varies. Actually, fewer at the moment. I mean, you can imagine it dropped right off during the pandemic.
Yeah, of course.
With the lockdown, and we had to do things virtually via Zoom and that sort of stuff. Actually, since then, it's been fewer people. We're doing much more before we ever have to have a meeting, because we're able to do much more by email and that sort of stuff. And so, but it can be anywhere between half a day through to just 1 or 2 appointments.
Right. Okay.
But we do it by appointment. So so if they're not there, then I get on with other stuff.
Yeah.
But it's a fairly steady trickle, and in terms of people getting in touch, that's, I don't know, 25 a day every day.
Wow.
Almost every day of the year.
Wow.
A lot more than I would have thought you would have said. I mean, I can vouch for what John's saying, because I've contacted your office and received a reply and a supportive letter that I've been able to use to open doors. Yep. And
glad the system worked.
Glad the system works, exactly. And so I can vouch that it works. Yeah. And clearly you do a lot more now before needing to have an appointment, which is fantastic. And I imagine that's partly because of the team that you've got behind you, based in your office.
Yeah, and there's and I think that's one of the big things. If you talk to some of the old stagers who were sort of MPs a generation ago, they didn't have any staff, and they handwrote letters and paid for their own stamps and stuff like that. Now I've got 4 or 5 staff, and they do different things, but 3 of them are there specifically just to help me, find out what the right answer is, do the research, make sure that if I'm writing back to you, that the answer that you get is factually correct, and not going to sort of send you off in the wrong direction, and et cetera, et cetera. That it takes a while. Yeah.
But I love that. I love the fact that there is somebody there that can help you. It was like when we were trying to sort out your diary type thing. It's so important to have that person that can go, actually, he's free here. Yeah, let's do it. And I really appreciated that. But there's no, I think what I've appreciated is your commitment rather than anything else. It's been lovely just for you to commit to something and do it. Yeah. Because I get frustrated when people don't.
And you've been an MP for a long time now.
Yeah, well, someone asked me about this the other day, and I had to catch myself, because it doesn't feel like more than, I still feel like a newbie.
Well, I've got a photo that I'd like to show you.
Oh God!
So this is from 2009. This is me and you. This is you presenting me an award.
Wow!
Is that the young person?
No, this is the Shell Livewire Young Business Person of the Year Southwest Award. This was
2009.
2009. To you, a minister
so much more
of
hair. It's really annoying.
Me too. Can you see? I've got a lot more hair.
Yeah, you've still got lots of hair there.
Oh my gosh!
But yeah, this is 2009.
Don't say it.
And I remember you coming along, because you were Minister of tourism, something like that. It's a role that doesn't exist anymore.
2009. I think I would have been a shadow minister then. Wouldn't
I? Yeah.
So I would have been shadow business or something like that, I think.
Yeah, I think there was a tourism angle, something like that.
Or that might have been, because I became tourism minister for when we went into government in 2010. So it might have been.
Oh, it may have been more 2010. I can't remember, to be honest. It was a long time ago. But yes. So.
And you look about 9. You need to put that picture up.
I'm going to put the photo up so people will watch this back. They can see the photo that I've just shown you.
Because that is a funny photo of you. I actually don't think you've aged that much on there, John.
Well, thank you very much.
I clearly have.
Please tell everybody else.
Well, you've gone from boyhood to adulthood.
Yeah,
that's the thing.
True.
It was quite a shock for me to see that.
I bet it was, yeah. But I'd love to know more about, what made you decide to become an MP and what that roadmap looked like. Because
I don't think I'm not sure there is a sort of a traditional route to doing it, but I'm pretty sure if there is, I probably didn't follow it. So I think if there is a traditional route, then it's, people do student politics or that sort of stuff, and they get involved with the local council, and I didn't do any of that, mainly because when I was at university, quite a lot of the people who were involved with politics were right peculiar people, and if you'd invited to their parties, you didn't want to
changed,
go. So I didn't do any of that at university or college or school or any of that stuff at all. Didn't really join a political party till I was in my mid-20s, and the only reason I did was because I started yelling at the telly. I started getting cross. I'm sure everyone's done it, right? Somebody comes on the radio, or you see someone on the telly, and they get asked this question, and they spout the most unutterable drivel, and you go, "No, you stupid man! It can't be like that. Why didn't you say this?" And you get cross. And I found myself getting crosser more and more often, and in the end, a bunch of my friends said, "Look, John, you're either going to have to shut the heck up, stop boring us, or you're going to have to do something about it." So in my mid-20s, it was actually, I think the thing that sparked it, I can't remember. It was when John Major, because I think he was Prime Minister at the time, he said he wanted to class the society, and that struck a chord with me. So I thought, and I've been sort of thinking, am I going to scratch this itch or not? And so that, and I don't think I did anything about it right then, but that was the thing that sort of made me think, all right, well, I might give it a go.
Bit of a catalyst, yeah.
Yeah, but I think anybody who tells you they're going to have a career in politics is kidding themselves and you. So I said I'd give myself sort of 10 years to try it, and if it was rubbish or I was rubbish, then I'd stop. But it seems to have worked. So.
Yeah, because it's not something you go in, like if you're a cabinet joiner or something like that, you go in there, you do your apprenticeship, and you make a piece of furniture, and somebody goes, "Oh yeah, that's a really nice piece of furniture," and the joints are all beautifully put together. Because actually, how do you define what is a good MP and what's not a good MP?
Well, exactly. So it's much more of a sort of random. There's not a sort of structured career path or anything like it.
But also, you don't go to the job centre and see an advert for MP.
No.
So how do you become an MP for your area?
So I mean, it depends on which party you want to get involved with, because each party has its own sort of internal way of doing it. But in the Conservative Party's case, I joined the party. I got involved with some local campaigns, council campaigns and that sort of stuff, and quite enjoyed it. They seem to think I wasn't sort of too awful at it either. And then you have to get, if you're a Conservative party member, then you have to be approved for the candidates list, which is sort of this big thing, and they take you away for a weekend and sort of make sure that you're not an axe murderer and stuff like that. And sort of, but it's quite intense sort of vetting process. It's like a sort of an assessment centre sort of thing.
I would never pass that.
Well, I'm amazed. I mean, I wasn't quite sure what they were looking for, to be honest. And then you're approved, and then you've got to start applying for seats, and then local parties choose, and it's all, in the Conservative Party's case, it's actually worryingly democratic. You turn up and they ask you questions, and then they all vote.
Okay.
Wow.
And it's so it's all very quite democratic, and I suppose it probably should be.
Very proper, isn't it? Yeah, which is good.
Yeah.
Good.
I'm too controversial to ever be an MP. I'd say something and really annoys them. But you're a really gentle, kind man.
Oh, bless you.
No, that's what I've experienced anyway, and I haven't experienced anything different. And you've always been a consistent person in that sense, and I suppose that's the thing that you want with it as an MP, is that consistency. If you see what I'm saying.
Yeah, I guess. I mean, there's there's probably as many different styles of MP as there are MPs, so there isn't only just one recipe, But I think you're right. I mean, the thing which surprises me is, some MPs, if you meet them in person, and then you see them on TV, and they're different people, and other people are the same.
Yeah.
So someone like, thinking of different sides of the political aisle, someone like Ken Clarke, or Anne Widdecombe, or indeed Tony Benn when he was alive. They were all, what you saw was what you got, and they were always the same.
Yeah.
Whether or not you liked it or not,
yeah.
But it meant that they were genuine, and people felt that they were seeing the real thing.
Yeah.
It's when they don't aren't sure they're seeing the real thing, that's more tricky, I think.
Well, it creates conflict, does it? We talked about this yesterday, didn't we, briefly? Because we were at the school doing some work with the kids at school, and I've never done any work with kids with you, have I?
No.
You've never done that. And you said, I've seen another side of you. And it's because, I'm not going to be as frank with a child. I'll be as frank with a child, but I'll say it in a different manner because I'm not going to hold back. But what I'm not going to do, but I'm not going to say it in the way, say I might say it to you, because fundamentally we're two adults. You're not a child and I'm not a child.
You should know better.
Yeah.
Yeah, we should.
Yeah.
But I think I absolutely agree with that statement that you said. I absolutely agree, because I am consistently consistent with who I am. This is me. Like it or lump it, this is me.
And it's funny, because even when you don't necessarily agree with what the person's saying, if someone's like that, I mean, recent example is this chap called Lee Anderson, who's a fairly recently elected Conservative MP. He's in some parts of Britain, he's Marmite, but the reason why the people who like him really like him is because he's his own man, and they like that.
Yeah. Perhaps I should go into politics.
I've always said that if I ever had the time, I'd be interested in becoming an MP.
Would you?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. So now I know how to go down that route. So there we are.
I'll vote for you, Mike.
Sounds good.
But I suppose, you have another life as well. It's not just a political life. And I know you have to juggle between being in London for your job and also being here. And that must be quite a...
Yeah, I mean, exactly. It's the... anybody who's ever done a sort of travelling sales job will know what it's like to be away, on the road for a couple of days each week or whatever it might be. If you don't want it, then don't apply for the job in the first place.
Yeah, of course.
But you're right. It does mean that you end up with a sort of two location life. Now, actually, if you love whatever it is you're doing, that's all right. And I've always, I was brought up in the countryside, and so I want to call home somewhere with green fields and a mendip behind me to walk up. And woods and stuff like that. But actually, it's kind of not. London is a fun, interesting world city as well. I just don't want to live there all the time.
No, I agree. And it's funny because I like to dip into London and I like to dip out, but you have to dip in every week.
Yeah, and I do, and it's I don't see terribly much of London. If I was just visiting for fun, I spend much more time in going to the theatre or whatever it might be. And I don't really get very much time to do that sort of stuff. But you're there, and it's around, and it means that I went to the British Museum at breakfast time the other day before I started work. I was there at sort of for a viewing at sort of 8:30 in the morning. That and a bacon sarnie, and then at 9:30 I was in work, and that's can't do that in Winscombe, even though it's got other benefits to it.
Sorry. Do you still have to book an appointment to go in the museum?
There's you still have to go in the normal way like any other member of the public. There are a couple of sort of clubs and societies, almost like being at university. And there's one that I'm a member of, which is about museums and that sort of stuff. And so they sometimes arrange pre-opening viewings on that basis. But I suspect probably they've got 36 of those different clubs and societies. There's probably most of the London educational establishments and that sort of stuff do that too. But so I occasionally get to see stuff like that.
Over to you now.
I get to ask my question.
Yeah.
My question is probably a bit of a tough one actually, and that is around being an MP. You've obviously got almost two sides of things you support. So when you're going in Parliament and you're going for a vote, how do you decide between voting for what is best for your constituents and what's best for your party?
Okay. I mean that's a tension for any MP. Doesn't matter.
Of course, not just yourself. Absolutely. Yeah,
it's I think the basic starting point is choose the right political party to join in the first place. Yeah, because if you do that,
sorry to interrupt. Have you always been conservative?
No, I didn't know what I was to start off with. I mean, one of the reasons why I was a late starter and didn't join a political party till I was in my 20s was because I never really stopped to think about it. Some of these people who were sort of student politicians had sort of clearly been thinking about it for far longer than me. I just knew I was cross, as I said before. So it took me a while to make up my mind. But if you do find yourself the right political home where your instincts and theirs align, then 90% of the time, more, actually there isn't a difference because you think you're broadly speaking doing the right thing. You may disagree on details at that point, even then, and then you've got to then there's a proper trade-off, because the other thing about obviously any democracy, the side with the most votes wins, right?
Yes.
So if I was to write a political manifesto, which was the John Penrose political manifesto rather than the Conservative Party political manifesto, they'd overlap a lot. Mm-hmm. Great deal.
As they should, because you're part of that party. Yeah.
But there'd be loads and loads of details where I'd be a bit more this and they'd be a bit less that, and it's inevitable. But I wouldn't get any of it done because I'd be one person with one vote.
Yeah.
And so you have to, if you're actually going to make Britain a better place, you have got to be able to say, I'm broadly on side with this. I don't like this detail. You don't like that detail. I'll vote for mine, yours if you'll vote for mine, and that's how we get stuff done. Now, on occasions, the only problem really comes when it's not a detail, it's a real issue of principle. Hasn't really happened for me yet, but it could. There've been a couple of occasions when I've said to my whip, if we do this, I won't be with you. Please don't. But again, it's like having an argument with your family. In most families, you can have an argument around the kitchen table, and you can be going at it hammer and tongs, within the family. But if someone else comes in and starts criticising your family, you'll all sort of close ranks, and that's kind of what it is in politics.
That's a really good analogy. I really like that.
So and that means that I will have lots of arguments before you get to the vote. To try and head off problems, and actually that increases the proportion of the time when actually it isn't a problem, because they know that if we do this, then Penrose and a bunch of people like him will not vote for us. Yeah. And you can sort of nudge and push and cajole and persuade, and if you do that upstream in advance, it works a lot better.
So how does it fit with having a wife in the position that she sits, if you see what I'm saying? Because does it create a conflict sometimes?
Well, it's for the benefit of your listeners and watchers. So my wife is a life peer. She was appointed by David Cameron, so she's in the House of Lords. In my defence, when I met her and married her, she wasn't anything like that. So I knew her before she was famous and posh. And she emphatically wasn't famous or posh when I met her. So in theory, she and I might end up voting in different ways. And And in practice, actually, when she first got appointed to be in the House of Lords, because David Cameron nominated her, how many years ago it was now, and I said look, you do know that I have so far consistently voted to make the House of Lords democratically elected, don't you? And that means I'm basically voting to abolish you. And I said, if I stop now just because you've gone into the House of Lords, that won't be very principled, will it? No. She's forgiven me, and I've done it several times since, because So she's so she's forgiven me for that. At least we're still talking.
But it's quite an unusual setting, though, isn't it, to have that?
Yeah, I think there's two other couples. But and it wasn't anything we ever planned or expected or particularly wanted. I mean, it was just because Dido was being helpful to David Cameron about some stuff to do with telecoms, over a decade ago, and that he thought she'd be good. But it wasn't ever anyone's plan at all. No.
It's quite funny, really, isn't it?
Life, eh?
So what do you do outside of politics? I know what you do, but other people might not know what you do.
Usual set of daft hobbies that everybody looks at and goes, why do you do that when I do this? I think so. I like fishing. Yeah. Dido likes trail hunting. She's anything to do with horses, actually, because she used to be a completely bonkers point-to-point jockey. And so when I first met her, I've lost count of the number of times that I've been going to a point-to-point course, worried sick that you're going to fall off and break her neck and that sort of stuff. And actually, I've gone with her in the ambulance on a couple of occasions when she has fallen off and not broken her neck, I hasten to add, but when she's hurt herself. So she doesn't race anymore, but she still rides an awful lot. So
she pretends racing though, doesn't she?
She's have you noticed she's a little bit competitive?
Yeah.
So she does that. I like fishing, and we do stuff with the girls as well. Who they quite like all sorts of different things, riding, and my eldest is really into lacrosse, which is a really bonkers game, which I'm only just getting to grips with. And my youngest likes drama and singing and that sort of stuff. So normal family stuff, basically. Yeah.
But I think sometimes people don't recognise that you have a normal life.
I think I'd go mad if I didn't.
Yeah.
I mean, you become a very strange person if you haven't got some sort of connection to normality.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, Westminster's a very peculiar environment. It's a proper goldfish bowl, and you can see why some people go off the rails if they lose touch with with normal life, I guess.
Of course. How did they support people with mental health within them?
Really good question, and I think the answer is no better than most other areas of life. I mean, it's still very recently that mental health had a lot of stigma attached to it. People were embarrassed to mention it and that sort of stuff. I think it's about 10 or 15 years ago that one of my colleagues, a guy who was elected on the same day as me, Charlie Walker, who's an MP just north of London, stood up in Parliament alongside a Labour MP, and they both said, we have mental health issues and we want to put that on the record and we want to explain it. And that was the first time I think anybody had ever done it. It was quite brave at the time. It really was. I mean, and that's only 10 or 15 years ago. It's not that long back. And I think quite a lot of other employers in lots of other walks of life would have been about the same place at about that time. And I think I think probably the stigma's died away a lot, but I don't think it's gone. Mm-hmm. And I don't think that Parliament and politics is any better than, or perhaps probably not worse either, than any other walk of life. And also I think the other problem is, Angie, you and I have talked about this in the past, part of the problem is that we don't understand the science of mental health anything like as well as we understand lots of other bits of other kinds of health. Mm. And if you don't understand the science as well, then we don't know really if you don't know why it happens, it's harder to work out what to do to fix it. And we know some things that work, but we're not very good at explaining why they work compared to what we can explain about fixing a knee joint or something like that in other bits of health. And therefore, it isn't just that there's all this stigma and latent leftover fear and that sort of stuff. It's also that actually we are just not as advanced in how we deal with this stuff. We don't know an awful lot about it, and therefore we do things which sort of work for most people, even though we don't quite know why. And we don't know what to do to make them work better. We can experiment, but we're still, I don't know, decades, if not more, behind other bits of medicine. You're more of an expert. I should be asking you the questions about this stuff.
Well, yeah, I suppose I don't see myself as an expert, but I've got a lot of experience with it. And I think one of the things that worries me slightly, and I was talking to somebody about medication the other day and how people's perception that you take this pill and then it makes you feel happy and da-da-da-da-da. And that bit that I was taught very early on in my career, that actually you take the medicine if that's what's required, but alongside of that, there needs to be some changes. Otherwise, you're still the same person that actually needed the medicine, if you see what I'm saying. Yeah. And I suppose, and also there's some of the science, if you want to look at it that way, say that these tablets do this, this and this, but actually it isn't. It's almost like hearsay that is developed into a science rather than actually be factual. There's no, tests or anything that approves that. But my concern, I suppose, is, we currently seeing over 150 people a week on a one-to-one level. Mm-hmm. which is a lot of people.
Yeah.
And costs a lot of money,
Yeah.
you know.
I see 5 on my surgeries on Friday, you know.
But
So
that's
to put that into context.
Absolutely.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think that's the thing about the investment, isn't it? It's that investment, the financial investment, as well as the emotional investment that is put into, say, helping those people. And it's like, I know everybody goes, oh, the government. And I don't think the government is necessarily responsible for the mental well-being of the community and the country. I think we are all responsible for our well-being.
I'd agree with that, although the one gloss I put on it is that for physical health, we have over a couple of centuries now designed out things that make you ill. So we've got rid of lead-based paints and stuff like that. And we're in the process of improving the air quality in cities by cleaning up car exhaust and those sorts of things. What I can't tell you, and I've never met anybody who can, unless you can tell me now, is there are some things which are known to be difficult and likely to provoke mental illness, mental health problems. But we just don't know enough about what it is about the environment that will make this particular mental problem less likely to happen. And so until we can get to the point where we can do the same thing for the work environment or society as a whole that we can do for lead-based paint, and we're miles away from that until we can get to that point. But when we can, then it will be much more stuff which the government can do to help society become a healthier place. But at the moment, you're right, we're miles away from being able to do that. We don't know. Right?
But I think so. I think we do know. I think we do actually know, and I think that the facts. I think it's clearer than what people think, because it's it's noted that talking therapy is a valuable tool to improve people's mental health. The fact that we need to create that in a way, we're a charity, for goodness sake. We raise that money. Dave and I used to pay for it before we could get enough grants. But
you're still treating after the problem. I'm talking about how to prevent it happening in the first place.
But that's the thing.
How can you design it so it never even crops up to begin with?
Because it's about communication. It's exactly the same. So you go home from work, you've had a tough day at work. Who do you talk to?
Well, after I've sworn at the telly and sort of kicked the furniture, Dido,
exactly. Yeah. And so, but you're conditioned to do that, and she's probably conditioned to do that to you. Yeah. But who does? Some people don't have anybody to go home to. A lot of people can't talk to their family.
So it's about teaching people those habits.
Yeah, it's a habit, because we've got out of that. Because many, many years ago, when we all lived in these little communities, when everybody was nosy about what everybody was doing, and
they still are in most villages.
Yes, yeah, you're right. I agree with you. We are a bit behind the times here. But
I think it's a real asset. But there we are.
Exactly, and I agree with you. And I think that's the point. It is an asset that we talk, and we're nosy about Mrs. Brown down the road who's got this going on, and actually I might just pop her a cake over and have a cup of tea. Yep. And I think we've lost that, because the world has got very small. So my niece has just WhatsApped me and said, I'll be there on Monday. She's travelling from Australia. Do you know what I'm saying? But while she's in Australia, she's on her own. She's got no other family there other than her husband. And
do you think social media means that actually, even when you are miles away from your circle of people you trust and want to talk to, I mean, you can still hop on a Zoom call, do or whatever. So that ought to make it actually in some ways easier, shouldn't it? Just to keep those, because what you're talking about is strengthening some habits early, so that people, and they'll stand you in good stead for the rest of your life. And actually, my argument then, I think, would be, yes, of course, that's to do with your family and to do with your local community, but it's also to do with the school, it's to do with education. The government trying to make sure that those things are instilled in the same way as they teach us about eating healthily and those sorts of stuff. So there's probably a bit of both there, isn't there?
I agree with you.
Where if we can get those things right, they'll equip you for life, right?
Yeah. And I think, I work in addiction, as you know, and it's not just addiction, but I work in addiction. And one of the things that came is, Carol, whatever her name is, I'm rubbish with names, as you know. What's her name? Carol Black.
Carol Black. Yeah, she did the report into it.
She did the reporting, but I think sometimes there's a naivety from some of that and I think part of that is because we get a chosen few. Do you know what I'm saying? Yeah. It's a chosen few that do that.
I mean, but she
did a really good job. I'm not knocking her, and her report was brilliant.
Well, and you know, I'm one of the few nerds who's read the whole thing, and
so am I.
But actually, but actually, I mean, what she was saying backs up what you just said, because she says she does the old prevention is better than cure thing. And she put some numbers on it and says that if you can spend this much on stopping it ever happening in the first place, here's the cost in human misery. Yeah. But also in pressure on the health service, all sorts
society,
of
prisons,
society, all that stuff. And here it is in pounds, and that's pretty stark. Actually. Yeah,
it is. So it was very stark.
Yeah, no, but she's kind of supporting what you're saying. Yeah.
But I think one beautiful thing about that is that, and I think people don't see that the government has stepped in, and I don't think the government should be the saviour of everything at all. Never do.
But it should be part of it, shouldn't it?
But we're all part of the same team, and all working hopefully in the same direction. And I think they have stepped up phenomenally. People don't know that necessarily unless they're in the know.
Well, and for most people, I mean, actually, funny enough, addiction is one of those areas where there is still more stigma.
Completely.
I'm sorry to say, but it is true. So it's one of those areas where a lot of people don't know much about it, because if you haven't actually personally encountered it in your family or yourself, why would you ever come across it?
Yeah.
And people tend to sort of they don't seek it out because of that stigma, I think.
Yeah. I agree with you. I agree with you. It's quite a tough one.
On that cheerful note, change the subject.
So I suppose if you could do anything to change, if you could change anything in the, what would you do?
Oh, blimey!
Sorry, that was a really random question. I don't know where that came from, but
the reason why it's a difficult question isn't that I've got a list, but the list is more than just one thing.
Yeah, so of course,
one of the things I do is I churn out policy papers. And I've got a list. There's about 3 I've done in the course of the last 3 years.
Do you enjoy writing papers?
I think I'm quite unusual. Most MPs don't do very much, do as much of it as I do. Lots do some. But yes, I do, because I find it is a really good way of me getting my thoughts sort of really in order, and making sure that I'm comfortable with both what the party's doing and what I think we should be doing. So I that's the way I happen to sort of get the brain to work properly. But so there's a great long list of things. So and I'd love to reform university degrees, because at the moment I don't think it's right that a 2.2 from one university is worth more or less than a 2.2 from another university. I think that's every other qualification in the country. If I get a B in GCSE chemistry, doesn't matter which school I went to or which university. But
it's a level playing field, really.
Level playing field, and that means it's more meritocratic that way. It gives everybody a second chance if they make a mistake. So I'd do that. I'd like to reform the House of Lords, as I mentioned before, and the honours system, which I think is far too full of people rewarding their mates. And the people they reward are often very, very capable. But I'd like to see it much more transparent. Yeah. So we've now got this points-based immigration system. So you can we let people in based on what the skills are. I'd like to see a points-based honours system. Yeah. And if you've got enough points, you can work it out on a website and you can apply. And if you've got enough points, you get one.
Yeah, I think that's a really nice idea.
I agree.
And it would mean that if you saw somebody who was Sir somebody something or other, you'd know that they were really, really good at whatever they did, and it'd be you could see it. Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, there's so many people that get an honour because of the job they do, which
I mean that can be legit.
I agree, it can be right, but sometimes you look and you think, well, that's because they've become a celebrity because of the job they've done, as opposed to it's that hardworking person that several times a week, they help out their ill neighbour, their community. They do something in their community, and you think, well, just because they're a TV presenter, they've got an honour. Is that right? I'm not sure.
So I agree. So I'd like to do that. There's a dozen other things I'd like to do as well. But
it links to values and beliefs, though. All of that stuff, doesn't it? It's about what are your values and what are your beliefs, and what do you feel that you would change? What would you change?
Oh, that's a very good question. What would I change? I need a minute to think about it. I like your idea about the honour system. Because whenever you get the New Year's honours, and I always think, well, that's because they're a celebrity and all of that.
And the thing about it is that actually the New Year's honours is that 99% of those people will be exactly the kinds of people you just described. I mean, you and I may not have heard of them, but they will be doing great work quietly to do something really important. But the trouble with it is that you don't necessarily, if you're not absolutely sure that the whole system is working properly, then who knows? That's the trouble.
Of course, and also when we hear about the New Year's honours and other honours, the media they're there to sell stories, so they want to sell a story about a well-known person.
They'll pick out two people.
Exactly, that's it.
Hundreds,
not Joe blogs or lady blogs that's in the community day in, day out, helping with a soup kitchen or whatever it is they've done. So absolutely.
So Angie, we're giving you loads of time to think about this.
That's
If we made you Prime Minister for the day, what would be your one thing?
Well, I'd probably really annoy everybody, because I'd just tell them all to sort themselves out and stop bloody moaning. Because I just think I sometimes
true, but not really a legislation program.
No, it probably isn't. I would I think if I had the choice to change anything in the world, in our country, I would want to manage the health service. I'd like to take it over and teach them how to save money and manage themselves in a way that's respectful to themselves and the organisation. I mean,
blimey, you're hired quick.
We put a lot.
Not a small ambition, though.
No, it isn't. It isn't. But we put a lot of money into the NHS. I don't think people appreciate it. It's a little bit like the charity. So in the charity, we have a system. You have 2 goes at it. If you don't turn up for 2 sessions, you're boshed off. That's it. Whatever the circumstances, you can reapply and come back on the waiting list. But fundamentally, we're not going to waste any more monies, because we have an accountability to the Charities Commission that we're not wasting money. Yeah. And I think to a certain degree, that should be applied. But also, I can afford to pay to go to a doctor. I can afford to go to pay to the dentist. I can afford to pay for my hospital bill. So if I can afford it, and I'd be happy to pay that money, let me pay.
Oh, interesting.
Without having, I've got a private health thingy, whatever, but I don't pay to go and see my GP, even if it was just a £5, just to say, actually, please can I have an appointment, and I can afford my £5 contribution. I know not everybody can, and I'm not.
I'd probably part company with you on some of that, actually, interestingly, but I get, the notion of value for money, I think everybody would want to get to somehow.
But also the other thing I would do is I'd stop the benefit system in the way it's done now. So, for example, I'm entitled to have PIP. I could claim for PIP if I wanted to, and I'd get it. I haven't applied for it, and I don't think I'll ever apply for that. But there's people that have it that should not have it, and it's like there isn't enough, like you were talking about before, about that. There's got to be systems in place, whereas there's a level of equality. And actually, somebody who's got a disability, who is genuinely there, you can see it in front of you that they have this disability. And I know mental health is a disability for some, but actually, what are you doing to improve that? There's got to be a level of we as a country cannot keep giving money away. We cannot do that. There's an accountability there.
So the thing, and again,
I know I'm probably stirring things.
Well, no, I wouldn't agree with everything you said, but the thing which I really like about it is that what you're trying to do is to address the underlying causes, not just the symptoms.
Yes.
And that is, I think, one of the enduring challenges. Doesn't matter who's in government.
Yeah.
And actually having something which doesn't just say, right, you've got an illness of any kind, we're going to make you better, but actually we're not going to address why you got ill.
Yeah.
And that is a really big issue for any government. Because the really sad thing about Britain, modern Britain, but it's been this way for longer, for generations, is that if you are in a well-paying job or in a well-off family, your life expectancy is an awful lot better, like 10 years better than someone who's in a less well-off family. and that gap has not got narrower. I mean, it doesn't matter. You know, it didn't get narrower under Blair, didn't get narrower under Brown, hasn't got narrower since the Conservatives have been involved in government either. And I think that's one of the things which is, you know, tells us that we're still dealing with symptoms and not causes. And that isn't because people don't care; it's because it's really hard to work out what some of this stuff is. So that goes back to your point about trying to help society. Be less likely to create the problem in the first place when we were talking about mental health. It's communication,
isn't it? It comes back to that bit that, you know, Mrs. whoever goes down to the doctors and said, I'm feeling a little bit under the weather, and I kind of, and you've got a 10-minute slot to do that all in. Yep. And in actual fact, what the best thing would be was for her to go and see somebody and spend an hour with somebody and ascertain what the problem is. I mean, we have at work, we don't have anybody off sick. The only time we've had somebody off sick is when they've had an operation for a physical problem, or when they had a heart attack. But other than that, and COVID, because we weren't allowed people in the house then, that was out of our power. But my staff never go off sick, ever. And they go, oh, it's because they're scared. It's rubbish. They're not. It's because we spend every month, every single member of staff gets to be sat down with a part of the management team and have an hour with them to chat. And they can talk about anything they like. But
also, an awful lot of it is, if you're doing a job which you find rewarding and which you love, then you'll...
People are less likely to. I hear that, but I also think we've got a very stressful job. And stress is one of the biggest challenges that people have in this world. And actually, if you support somebody in their stress, instead of abandoning them in some way, even if you go, take 3 months off sick, you can take 3 months off sick, but it doesn't resolve the stress. The stress could be that your colleague keeps doing the same thing and not listening or whatever, and actually they need to leave the company, and you support that person in finding them another job. Do you understand what I'm saying? Instead of, it costs a lot of money to employ somebody, doesn't it? You know that. You know your team. If you lost one of your team tomorrow, you'd be, oh, my word, I've got to start again. And it's tough. Yeah. It's really tough. So to actually nurture those teams and develop those teams rather than that black and white thinking, which I think a lot of organisations have. And they do the token gesture, we've got a mental health support on the side that you can go to. People won't go. People do go, but they don't really go, because they're frightened of, as you said, the stigma that sits behind it. Yeah.
There you go. But so management theory, courtesy of Ange. But if it works, that's really interesting. Yeah.
But it's like A&E. We were watching. I love A&E on the telly. Dave goes, it's my favourite programme. And there was somebody that went in there with a thumb cut on their thumb. Now this cut was no bigger than, it was tiny. It was like a paper cut, but it was obviously a proper cut. I'm thinking, put a bloody plaster on it. What happened to...
What about resilience, isn't it?
We don't have...
Tough love over here.
Go yeah.
Yeah, you know
There's
me.
A lot of tough love. So I've thought about mine.
Yeah.
Go on.
Mine are quite political, actually.
Okay.
So the first one is about manifestos.
Yeah.
And making sure that the government, if they're selling a manifesto to get voted on, it's then ensuring that they follow through on that, which sometimes things aren't possible. Sometimes things can't happen because they don't get the votes or whatever. But ultimately, if I go to a car showroom and see a brochure and it says the car's going to do this, this and this, and then I buy it and it doesn't do half of those things, I'm going to take it back and say, I bought this car and it doesn't do it. So I think somehow holding them more to account, I think, is important.
Yeah, okay.
I think that'd be a good one. And then the other one,
we're really opinionated,
aren't
we?
Today we are.
Sorry.
Sorry. I think it's you, John.
I'm bringing out the worst in everybody here.
And then my other one is about ballot papers.
All right, okay.
In terms of when you go and do your vote, if you've got 3 people on there, you might have someone from Labour, Conservative, Liberal, Democrats, whoever it might be. There should be a box that says none of the above. Yeah. Because you don't believe in, though not necessarily the party. It's more about the individual. And my thoughts are that, and I've got a couple of friends I've spoken to this about as well, that my thoughts would be that, let's say you choose to vote for the Conservatives, but you don't believe in that individual. Well, it means the Conservatives get the vote, but the local party needs to go back and find a different candidate.
Interesting.
Bit of an odd idea.
But also it would mean you could still exercise your democratic right to vote, even though actually you're not voting for one of the candidates. I mean, I'm not sure. Yeah, okay. I mean,
but I agree.
Different.
It is. But I would like that. Yeah. Because I don't think some of the people that I've voted for has purely because they've belonged to the party, not the individual.
Well, but also that people vote for a whole range of different reasons. Sometimes it's for the person, sometimes it's for the party.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's for things which sound really random but matter to them. And the point about democracy is you and I don't get to opine on why that person over there has voted that particular way because it made sense to them, even though it doesn't make sense to you and me. That's their vote still counts the same as yours and mine.
Yeah, so, absolutely.
Yeah, definitely.
Another question I've got is out of your career, because like we said, you've been an MP for a long time now. Is there a particular moment where you reflect back and go, "Wow, that was good"?
Yeah, I love that.
We're splitting the question though. You put us on the spot. Now it's your turn.
A couple.
Okay, great.
But there's and some of them, I can't claim all the credit for or anything like that. But I was part of it. One of them actually is something which I doubt very many of your listeners and watchers will have heard of, but I think is going to be important in the long term. Which is there used to be an organisation called English Heritage, which looks after listed buildings, and it also looks after Stonehenge and places like that. And when I was a minister, one of my various ministerial jobs we were talking about before, I was in charge of it, and it wasn't it wasn't working properly at the time. And so, with advice from some of the people involved in English Heritage, we took the decision to split the thing. So you got one thing which deals with the listed buildings, and one bit that deals with the properties, places like Stonehenge. And the bit that deals with places like Stonehenge, I think, is going to turn into a second national trust. It's going to be that big and that important. It won't own quite as much land, perhaps, but it will own stuff that people really want to go and see and is a really important part of Great Britain. I mean, that was my original decision. Other people have carried it through afterwards as well. So as I said, it's not just me. But I was a bloke who said, we should do this. And actually, I think that one decision, which I said isn't terribly famous, will probably outlast you and me and everybody watching today.
Wow.
So that's fun. And the other one, actually, just much more locally, is some stuff which I originally did with Ange, which is about what the problem which we used to have, and it still comes up every once in a while in Weston with some of our local rehabs. There's some really good ones. But at the time, at least, there were some which were really not so great, and that wasn't right for the people who are getting treated there, and it also wasn't right for the people who live around them because there are all sorts of knock-on blue light problems going on. And we managed to get some of the worst ones to clean up or close down, and there was a big campaign. And again, I was only part of that, and we got the police involved, and the council in the end came along, and the health people locally, and that made a big difference in Weston in terms of whether or not people. It changed the way people thought about the town, I think. Now, it's not the kind of problem which you solve once and it's solved forever. No. You have to sort of keep on it. But actually, that's over a decade ago now. But that I think was something which local people realised at the time needed to be fixed and wanted to have fixed. And while I don't think it's perfect, far from it, because I don't think anywhere is perfect when it comes to drugs and addiction, anywhere in the country or probably any other country in the world, it does make a difference, and it did make a difference, and it means now that we're trying to sort of keep on top of a problem rather than fix it from scratch. So that's two. There's probably others, but
that's really good. I guess.
What would you be proud of?
Oh, why am I being put on the spot now?
Sorry, I don't mean to put you on the spot.
What would I probably John presenting me my award back in 2009. There we go. Yeah, look at that. My claim to fame.
Good answer. Yeah.
I don't know what to think about it. What's yours?
I've got lots.
Yeah, I think I've got a few.
I've got quite a few as well. I think partly what I do for a living, the fact that I've changed help people change their lives.
You'll have a whole list of people. Yeah,
I've got a lot of people. Yeah, and I'm really proud of that. And it makes me feel emotional thinking about it.
Your voice is croaked a little bit, just saying. I can hear it.
But I mean, it's good. Yeah,
and I'm proud of that. I'm proud that I'm a good mum. And I do a lot for the community that people haven't got a clue about, and I'm proud of that. And I don't need to boast about that. If you see what I'm saying, I'm quite, I literally do work 20 hours a day trying to improve things for people, and I know that and I like that. I like that about me. Yeah. And I think I've come from quite a difficult background to be able to, and on my book. Yeah. I'm proud of that. Yeah. I wrote the book.
Book's a good one.
And I love this. And I love the charity and all of that. Yeah. Very proud of that.
So my follow-up question is, obviously, general election's not that far away now. What are you hoping to do between now and then? Have you got a goal or something that you can share that you're working on that you can talk about?
Lots. In no particular order of importance. There's a load of stuff going on in Parliament at the moment which will make a big difference to the way that Britain works sort of post-Brexit and post-pandemic. And it's just about making us a really dynamic, competitive, internationally successful society. And so it is actually to do with competition and whether or not we've got an economy that revs fast or slow. And it's about the sort of the plumbing of that engine, if I can put it that way. So there's about 3 or 4 different bills which matter to that. And it's something which I've spent quite a lot of time on. Rishi Sunak, when he was Chancellor of the Exchequer, asked me to do one of these policy papers I was talking about earlier on. So I know a reasonable amount about that. And so there's quite a lot of stuff in Westminster that I want to get done, because I think that it's an opportunity to just sort of set the country up, if you like. And there's some other stuff about things like government purchasing. It's not terribly glamorous, but actually, if the government just buys better, then your and my public services will work better.
Yeah,
of course,
a lot better. So that sort of stuff matters. Locally, there's a whole series of things that I think we need to do. I mean, there's some stuff about trying to build. Actually, this isn't just local, but it matters in Western. We haven't got enough homes in this country, so the cost to rent or to buy, for everybody, but particularly anybody under 40, the so-called generation rent, is just way too high. So we need to build an awful lot more. But in places, here's a really good example. If you build all over green fields, then your villages don't last as villages very long, they turn into towns. And actually, if you've got somewhere like Central Western, which really wants and needs the investment, actually what we should be doing is to build in the middle of towns like Weston. So there's a whole series of things that we can do which will make Weston a better place, but also the country a better place, because it'll make housing more affordable, and also it'll mean that people can live closer to work, so they can walk or bicycle down to the shops as well, that sort of stuff. It's greener, it's much more environmentally friendly and sensible to do that, and you create much more interesting neighbourhoods as well, places that are alive after 5 o'clock in the afternoon, that sort of stuff. Yeah. So those sorts of things matter, and they'll matter to Western in particular, but they matter nationally as well. And I guess the other bit which is really worrying me at the moment is, you've probably seen all the stuff about water quality in our rivers.
Yes.
Now, interestingly, Western has actually been relatively good in the past on that sort of stuff. There's a big it's not so new anymore, big sewage treatment plant down by Breen, built over a decade ago now. And after that was built, broadly speaking, all the local water quality on Western Beach and that sort of stuff all got a lot better. And that was great. The last 2 years, it started getting worse again. And I've been talking to the Environment Agency, and they said, look, they are scratching their heads, because all the stuff that everyone's talking about for the rest of the country, which is all about sewage overflows and storm overflows and flash floods, flushing all sorts of stuff into the, that actually doesn't apply in Western, because if you look at the pipes in Western, I think they operated once last year. I mean, it's not the same as the rest of the country. So they're saying, we thought we knew what the answer was. Actually, Western seems to be a bit of an oddity, and we're trying to find out what it is. But we know there's something wrong, because the water quality isn't as good as it was a couple of years ago. And so that is something which I want to make sure that they fix. Equally, the good old problems which we fix and then they get worse and then we fix them again. are things like Junction 21 of the M5, malfunction junction. Every time they expand it, it's good for about 18 months, and then the traffic builds up again, and you have to do some more. And we're at one of those moments now. So there's a whole series of sort of local issues which local officials have taken to sort of flinching when they see me coming because they know what I'm going to say. But that's fine. That's I'm not apologising for that. That's what the job is.
Of course,
and I want to see many more of those I can. But if you'd asked me that same question 3 years ago, there'd have been a slightly different list. But we fixed most of those now, and now here's the next stuff.
Of course, yeah. Which is it's really nice to hear those things because they're all things that I'm very much aware of because I live in Weston. Yeah. So it's really nice to hear that you're on them.
Yeah, well, you're helping them building all these and houses, Mike.
Yes, yeah. As a property developer in Weston.
There you go.
There we go.
Yeah. Well, I'd like to get rid of signs. I'm sick of signs.
What's wrong with signs?
Well, there's so many of them.
What, road signs, you mean?
Yes. I mean, it's ridiculous. Why do you have to have 20, 30 mile an hour road signs in certain places?
I know how fast to drive.
Yeah, but once they've told you once, you know. Do you know what I'm saying? It's like constant signs. There's so many signs. Anyway, enough of that. Enough of my opinion. Are you going to stand again?
I think, yes, I am. Yeah, I've just got this vision of Ange out there in the middle of the night with a head torch, sort of on the hacksaw, sort of cutting off the signs.
Do you know, if it wasn't illegal, I probably would, but I won't. But I'd also like people
yes, I am going to stand again, yes.
pick up rubbish.
Yeah.
Because that's the other thing, particularly in North Somerset, they've had a major problem, haven't they? I think there was
there's a lot of very small pockets of groups of people that are coming together now doing litter picks.
Oh yeah. That's been going on for a while now.
Yeah.
So for example, Sand Bay has had a squad doing that for a while. There's some out in some of the villages too. Some villages do a lot of it, others don't. Uphill does a chunk of stuff as well. So there's some groups in Whirl as well. So I mean it's good. I mean to the point you were making before about communities coming together and doing things with each other for each other. That it's a really good example, and that does happen. And it makes a difference too because it's the old thing about if you see somewhere which has got litter, you think nobody minds if you drop more. And it genuinely does make a difference. So if you clear it up, actually people drop less. I mean, it doesn't solve it permanently. But it does make a big difference. So yeah,
Dave and I are constantly picking up rubbish along this road. Yeah. Constantly, we spend our Now what we do is because we have a metal recycle thing we save it all and put it in a bag, send it down to get money for it.
Oh, there you go.
But it has its value. But when you think about it, it's a bit of a pain, really.
Be interesting to see that there's supposed to be a deposit return scheme coming in.
Really? Bottles and when it was like that when we were kids. Well, I'm older than all of you, so
we'll draw a veil over that. But that's supposed to be coming in and designing that's the devil's really in the detail on that stuff. But it'd be interesting if they get that right to see what happens to the amount of stuff that just gets slung out of car windows. And with any luck, it'll drop. But we'll
a
see.
bottle they used to give.
10p
when I was a kid.
10p, that sounds like a lot.
It was a lot. It was a lot of money. So you definitely.
What's 10p in Mars bars? You could probably.
You buy a couple of Mars bars with that one.
Yeah, well, that would have motivated me when I was 6, wouldn't you?
I'm not going to tell you what Dave used to do, but they used to go. Well, I am going to tell you. They used to go around when they were really little. They'd go around the back of the pub, steal the bottles, take them around the front, and get the money. Boys will be boys, won't they?
Yeah, I'm sure the girls never did anything
like
that.
No, we don't do things like that as girls. Anyway.
Brilliant. Shall we
call it a day?
We've ranged pretty widely.
We have. It's been really good fun. I've enjoyed it.
It's been a great chat, and we'd love to have you back at some point. So.
I've enjoyed it, and thanks for my tea. As well.
It's my pleasure. In our
branded Somewhere House
Somerset month.
There we are. Good stuff.
That's that. Anyway. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for inviting me. Cheers.
No problem.